They thought she was trash. They thought she was just a stepping stone, a quiet, obedient wife they could use up and toss aside when her usefulness ran dry. Marcus Wellington and his ruthless mother didn't just divorce Catherine. They erased her. They threw her out onto the street in the dead of winter with nothing but the clothes on her back, laughing as they locked the gates of the mansion she had polished for 10 years. But they made one fatal calculation. They forgot to check who she really was. They didn't know that the name on her birth certificate wasn't just a name. It was a death sentence for their entire empire. When the judge read it aloud, the silence was so loud it shattered their lives. The snow was falling in thick, wet clumps, sticking to the wrought iron gates of the Wellington estate like bandages on a wound. It was typical Chicago weather for late January, unforgiving, bitter, and gray. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the glacial atmosphere inside the mahogany-paneled library where Catherine Wellington stood, shivering not from temperature, but from shock. "It's done, Catherine. Don't make a scene," Marcus said. He didn't even look up from his phone. He was scrolling through something. Probably stock prices, or perhaps messages from Jasmine, the 23-year-old receptionist he had been mentoring for the past 6 months. Catherine stared at him. She was 32, but in that moment she felt ancient. 10 years. She had given him 10 years. She had dropped out of art school to support him while he finished his MBA. She had worked double shifts at a diner to pay for his suits so he could look the part of a successful broker before he actually was one. She had nursed his mother, Vivian, through a hip replacement and about a pneumonia that nearly killed the old woman. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You can't just tell me to leave. This is my home." Was a sharp voice cut in from corner. Vivian Wellington sat in her high-backed velvet chair, sipping tea from a cup Catherine had hand-washed that morning. The older woman's eyes were hard, glittering with a malice she had barely bothered to conceal for the last decade. "It was your home, dear. But let's be honest, you never really fit the furniture, did you? You were a placeholder. A sturdy, reliable placeholder until Marcus was ready for the real thing." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. "A placeholder. I'm his wife, Vivian. I scrubbed your floors. I cooked your meals. And you were compensated," Marcus said, finally looking up. His handsome face, once the center of Catherine's world, now looked like a mask of indifference. He slid a check across the antique desk. It slid over the polished wood and stopped at the edge, teetering. $5,000, Marcus stated. "That's plenty for a fresh start. Consider it severance pay. The prenup is ironclad, Kath. You get what you came in with, which if I recall was a suitcase full of rags and a rusted Honda." "I signed that prenup because I trusted you," Catherine cried, tears finally spilling over. "You said it was just to protect your family's business, that it wouldn't matter because we were partners." "Business is business," Marcus shrugged, adjusting his silk tie. "And honestly, Kath, look at you. You're tired. You've let yourself go. Jasmine brings an energy to my life that I need. She understands the corporate world. She fits the image of a CEO's wife. You're still just a waitress I met at the diner." Vivian set her cup down with a sharp clink. "The guards will escort you out in 10 minutes. Take your personal effects. Leave the jewelry. Marcus bought that, so it's family property. Leave the car keys. The lease is in the company name. And for heaven's sake, don't take any of the silverware." The cruelty was breathtaking. It wasn't just a breakup. It was an eviction of her soul. Catherine looked at the check. $5,000. It wouldn't even cover first and last month's rent in a decent apartment in the city. "You're throwing me out?" she asked, her voice trembling with a rage she didn't know she possessed. "In a blizzard? With nothing?" "You have legs," Vivian sneered. "Use them." Catherine reached out, her hand hovering over the check. Then, with a sudden surge of dignity, she swatted it off the desk. It fluttered to the floor, landing near Marcus's Italian leather loafers. "I don't want your money," Catherine said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "And I don't want your pity. But remember this, Marcus. You built this life on my back. You think you're standing tall, but you're standing on a foundation that I poured. When I leave, I take my luck with me." "Oh, Spare us the melodrama. Marcus laughed, a harsh barking sound. Get out, Kath, before I have security drag you. She turned and walked out. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't take the coat Marcus had bought her for Christmas. She walked to the coat closet, grabbed her old worn denim jacket, the one she had when she met him, and stepped out the front door. The wind hit her like a physical blow. The snow blinded her. As she walked down the long driveway, the heavy iron gates began to close automatically behind her. She heard the distinct click of the lock engaging. She was alone. No car, no money, no home. Just the biting cold and the echoing laughter of the man she had loved more than life itself. But as Catherine trudged toward the main road, fighting the hypothermia that was already nipping at her fingers, she wasn't thinking about survival. She was thinking about a phone number, a number she had memorized 20 years ago and promised herself she would never, ever call. She reached into her pocket. She still had her phone. Marcus hadn't taken that, likely because it was an older model and not worth his time. Her fingers were stiff, but she dialed. It rang once, twice. Thornton and Associates. A crisp, professional voice answered. How may I direct your call? Put me through to Richard, Catherine said, her teeth chattering. I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Thornton does not take unsolicited calls. If you would like to schedule... Tell him, Catherine interrupted, looking back at the Wellington mansion looming on the hill. Tell him his daughter is ready to come in from the cold. For 3 weeks, Marcus Wellington felt invincible. The divorce proceedings were moving faster than a freight train. His lawyer, Bernard P. Crawford, a man known in legal circles as the Shark of Illinois, assured him it was an open-and-shut case. Catherine had no assets, no high-powered counsel, and the prenup was watertight. Marcus spent his days finalizing the merger between his company, Wellington Technologies, and a massive conglomerate, and his nights whining and dining Jasmine at the city's most exclusive spots. Life was an upgrade in every sense. You look tense, babe, Jasmine purred one evening, tracing the rim of her martini glass. They were at Le Bernardin, sitting at the best table in the house. Just anticipation. Marcus smiled, though his stomach was in knots. The merger was the biggest deal of his life. If it went through, he wouldn't just be rich, he would be wealthy. The shareholders are meeting next week once the divorce is finalized on Friday. I'm a free man with a clean slate. The board loves stability, and getting rid of the dead weight was actually a recommendation from the consultants. Dead weight? Jasmine giggled. She really was, wasn't she? I saw a picture of her. So plain. She served a purpose, Marcus said dismissively. But you don't keep the training wheels on when you're ready to ride the Ducati. Whatever guilt Marcus might have felt was easily washed away by the validation of his mother, Vivian. She called him daily to congratulate him on reclaiming the family dignity. To them, Catherine had just been a temporary employee who had overstayed her contract. Meanwhile, across the city, Catherine was living a very different reality. She wasn't staying at the Drake, and she wasn't in a penthouse. Not yet. She was staying in a small, nondescript guest room in a brownstone in Lincoln Park. It was comfortable, warm, and smelled of old books and lemon polish. Sitting across from her was Thomas Reed. He wasn't a flashy lawyer. He wore a cardigan, looked like a kindly grandfather, and worked out a small office that smelled of pipe tobacco. But anyone who knew the real history of Illinois law knew that Thomas Reed didn't lose. He didn't argue cases. He dismantled them. They filed for an expedited hearing, Thomas said, sliding a thick document across the coffee table. Friday at 9 a.m. Judge Morrison is presiding. He's a tough old bird. Usually favors the breadwinner. Crawford is counting on you not showing up or showing up with a public defender who hasn't had time to read the brief. Catherine stared at the paperwork. They listed irreconcilable differences and failure to contribute to marital assets. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. Failure to contribute. I manage the household accounts. I introduced him to the investor that saved his company in 2018. Remember Mr. Phillips? I was the one who charmed him at the charity gala, while Marcus was too drunk to speak. We know, Catherine, Thomas said softly. But in the eyes of the court, without documentation, that's just hearsay. The prenup waives your right to spousal support unless we can prove duress or fraud. I don't want support, Catherine said, her eyes flashing with a steeliness that reminded Thomas vividly of her father. I want justice. I want them to understand that they didn't just discard a wife. They discarded the only thing protecting them. Thomas smiled, a slow, dangerous curling of his lips. I spoke to your father this morning. Catherine stiffened, and he's eager. He wanted to buy the bank holding Marcus's mortgage and foreclose immediately. I told him to wait. That's too easy. It's too quick. Thomas leaned forward. We have something better. I've been digging into Wellington Technologies' financials. Marcus has been sloppy. Arrogant men usually are. He's been leveraging assets he doesn't fully own to push this merger through. The warehouse on Fifth. Yes. And the patent for the new software algorithm. He listed them as sole property of Wellington Technologies. Catherine's brow furrowed. Aren't they? Technically, yes, Thomas said. But the original funding for those assets came from a discreet trust, a silent angel investor back when the company was a garage startup. Do you remember who signed the check for the seed money? Catherine closed her eyes, thinking back to those days of ramen noodles and late nights. It was the Phoenix Group. Marcus said it was some venture capital firm. The Phoenix Group? Thomas nodded. A shell company wholly owned by a blind trust. He paused for effect. A trust established in 1993. The beneficiary of that trust is you, Catherine. The room went silent. The ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to boom. Me? Catherine whispered. Your father set it up when you ran away from home to be with Marcus. He couldn't stop you, and he knew you wouldn't take his money directly. So he funneled it into Marcus's business, so you wouldn't starve. Marcus Wellington doesn't own his company. Catherine, in a roundabout way, you do. Catherine sat back, the breath leaving her lungs. For 10 years, Marcus had strutted around like a king, claiming he was a self-made man, belittling her for her lack of ambition. All the while, he was spending her money. His success was literally her inheritance. Does he know? She asked. No, and neither does Crawford. They think the Phoenix Group is just a silent partner they can buy out after the merger. Thomas closed the folder. On Friday, we aren't just going to contest the divorce. We're going to audit the marriage. He humiliated me, Thomas, Catherine said, her voice trembling with a mix of grief and fury. He threw me in the snow like garbage. Then on Friday, Thomas said, standing up and offering her a hand, we will bury him in an avalanche. Friday morning arrived with a leaden sky. The Superior Court of Cook County was buzzing. The divorce of Marcus Wellington, the rising tech star, was minor news. But the presence of Bernard P. Crawford ensured a gallery full of legal interns and curious onlookers. Everyone wanted to see the shark devour a helpless victim. Marcus arrived in a charcoal Armani suit, looking every inch the victor. Vivian was on his arm, draped in furs, looking at the courtroom benches with disdain. Jasmine was there too, sitting in the second row, trying to look demure in a navy dress that was slightly too tight. She's late, Marcus muttered, checking his Rolex. It was 8:58 a.m. Probably couldn't afford the subway fare, Vivian snickered. Don't worry, darling. If she's a no-show, we get a default judgment. It's even better. Crawford, a man who looked like a bulldog in a pinstripe suit, leaned over. If she does show up, don't say a word, Marcus. Let me handle the theatrics. We'll paint her as a gold digger who contributed nothing. At 9 a.m. sharp, the heavy oak door swung open. The room didn't go silent immediately. It was a gradual hush, starting from the back and rolling forward like a wave. Catherine walked in. She wasn't wearing the rags they expected. She wasn't wearing the cheap department store suit she used to wear to church. She was wearing a tailored white power suit that cost more than Marcus's car. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was sleek, straight, and shining. She wore dark sunglasses, which she removed slowly as she walked down the center aisle. But it wasn't her appearance that caused a stir. It was a man walking beside her. Bernard Crawford's jaw literally dropped. He nudged Marcus violently. Is that Thomas Reed? Who? Marcus asked Oblivious. Thomas Reed? Crawford hissed. He hasn't taken a divorce case in 20 years. He represents royalty. He represents nations. Why is he walking with your wife? Catherine took her seat at the defendant's table. She didn't look at Marcus. She didn't look at Vivian. She pulled out a fountain pen and placed it on the table with a precise, deliberate click. All rise, the bailiff bellowed. Judge Morrison entered, looking bored. Docket number 44492. Wellington versus Wellington. Let's make this quick. I have a full schedule. Crawford stood up, smoothing his jacket. Your Honor, Bernard Crawford for plaintiff. My client seeks a dissolution of marriage based on the prenuptial agreement signed 10 years ago. We are also asking for a dismissal of any alimony claims, citing the defendant's lack of contribution to the marital estate. The judge looked at Thomas Reed. And for the defense? Thomas stood slowly. He didn't smooth his jacket. He didn't posture. Thomas Reed for the defendant. And Your Honor, we are filing a counter-motion. A counter-motion? Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. On what grounds? The prenup is standard. We are not contesting the prenup, Your Honor, Thomas said, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. We are enforcing it, specifically the clause regarding the division of assets acquired independently of the marital union. Marcus whispered Crawford. What is he doing? I have all the assets. Shut up, Crawford whispered back, sweat beading on his forehead. Go on, Mr. Reed. The judge said, my client, Thomas continued, gesturing to Catherine, was removed from a marital home 3 weeks ago without resources. The plaintiff claimed that the home, the cars, and the business, Wellington Technologies, were his sole property. However, we have evidence that suggests a significant fraudulent misrepresentation of asset ownership. Objection! Crawford roared. This is a fishing expedition. Marcus Wellington built that company from the ground up. With whose money? Thomas asked sharply. Venture capital. Marcus shouted, unable to help himself. The Phoenix Group? Thomas smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who had just cornered a rabbit. Exactly. The Phoenix Group. Thomas walked to the bench and handed a file to the judge, then dropped a copy on Crawford's table. Crawford opened it. His face went pale. He looked at the paper, then at Catherine, then back at the paper. Read the name of the sole beneficiary, Counselor. Thomas said. Crawford swallowed hard. Catherine Thornton. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Thornton, Vivian whispered loudly, like the hotel chain, the bank. Like Richard Thornton, Thomas corrected, turning to face the gallery. The industrialist. Marcus looked like he had been hit by a truck. What? No. Kat's last name is Hayes. She's a nobody from Ohio. Her mother's maiden name was Hayes. Catherine spoke for the first time. Her voice was crystal clear. I used it because I want to know if a man could love me for me, not for my father's billions. I got my answer, Marcus. The judge was reading the documents with wide eyes. Mr. Crawford, this document shows that the Phoenix Group provided 85% of the initial funding for Wellington Technologies. It also states that the funding was a conditional loan, callable at any time by the beneficiary. Callable? Marcus choked out. It means, Thomas said, turning to Marcus, that you owe the Phoenix Group, and by extension, Catherine, $12 million plus interest, immediate payment, or under the terms of the loan, forfeiture of all IP and physical assets. This is insane. Marcus stood up, his face purple. She's lying. She served coffee. She doesn't know anything about business. Sit down, Mr. Wellington. The judge barked. But wait, there's more, Thomas said, holding up a finger. Since you evicted the beneficiary from her home, you violated the good faith clause of the investment agreement, which triggers a penalty clause. Thomas turned to the judge. Your Honor, we moved to freeze all assets of Wellington Technologies and Marcus Wellington personally, pending a forensic audit. We also moved to invalidate the NDA regarding the upcoming merger as a primary stakeholder. Mrs. Wellington was not consulted. Merger? The judge looked at Marcus. You were selling a company you didn't fully own? I own it. Marcus screamed. She's just a wife. She's nothing. She, Thomas said, his voice booming now, is the woman who paid for your suits. She is the woman who paid for your office. And she is the woman whose name you just dragged through the mud. I grant the motion. Judge Morrison slammed his gavel. Assets frozen immediately. Mr. Wellington, you are not to leave the jurisdiction. Mr. Crawford, get your client under control. The courtroom erupted. Reporters were frantically typing on their phones. Vivian Wellington had slumped in her seat, clutching her pearls, looking as if she might faint. Jasmine had already stood up and was edging toward the exit, realizing the gravy train had just derailed. Marcus stood there, shaking. He looked at Catherine. For the first time in years, he really looked at her. He saw the power in her posture, the cold intelligence in her eyes. "Kath," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Kath, we can talk about this. Baby, please." Catherine stood up. She smoothed her white jacket. She looked him in the eye, and the entire room held its breath. "You're right, Marcus," she said. "The prenup is ironclad. You leave with what you came in with." She paused, glancing at his expensive watch. "Actually, I paid for that watch. Take it off." The walk from the courtroom to the parking lot felt like a funeral procession for Marcus Wellington's life. The press, usually uninterested in the divorce proceedings of mid-level tech CEOs, had been tipped off. The name Thornton had gone out over the police scanners and court blogs like a distress flare. By the time Marcus pushed open the heavy double doors of the courthouse, a wall of flashbulbs blinded him. "Mr. Wellington, is it true you tried to defraud Richard Thornton's daughter? Did you really throw her out in a blizzard? Marcus, are you insolvent?" The questions were like darts, piercing the armor of arrogance he had worn so comfortably just an hour ago. Beside him, Vivian was using her crocodile skin handbag to shield her face, muttering curses about vultures and low-class peasants. Bernard Crawford, the shark, was nowhere to be seen. He had slipped out the back entrance the moment the judge pounded the gavel, realizing that a frozen client was a non-paying client. Marcus pushed through the crowd, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He reached his Aston Martin, fumbling for keys. He needed to get to the office. He needed to fix this. It was just a misunderstanding, a leverage play. He could smooth it over. But when he slid into the driver's seat and turned the ignition, the engine sputtered and died. The dashboard lit up a singular, terrifying message. Remote disable. Contact lender. "No!" Marcus hissed, jamming the start button again. "No, no, no." "What is it?" Vivian shrieked from the passenger seat. "Start the car, Marcus. These people are touching the windows. They killed the car." Marcus stared at the dashboard in horror. "The lease. It's under the company name. The assets are frozen. They had to take a taxi." The ride to Wellington Technologies was silent, filled only with the heavy breathing of two people watching their world collapse in real time. When they arrived at the glass and steel tower in downtown Chicago, Marcus didn't even wait for his change. He sprinted into the lobby, ignoring the startled look of the security guard. A man named Ralph, whom Marcus had never bothered to greet in 5 years. "Mr. Wellington, wait," Ralph called out, stepping out from behind the desk. "Access has been restricted." Marcus spun around, his face flushed. "Restricted? I own this building. I am the CEO." "Not as of 20 minutes ago, sir," Ralph said, looking uncomfortable but firm. "We got a call from the receivership court. A Mr. Thomas Reed sent over a writ. No one enters the executive suite without a federal monitor present. Your badge has been deactivated." Marcus stared at the turnstiles. The little light on the scanner was a solid, unyielding red. He looked around the lobby. Employees were whispering, glancing at him over their lattes. He saw the pity in their eyes, or worse, the amusement. They knew. The email had probably already gone out. "Fine." Marcus spat, straightening his jacket. "I'll work from home. I have the merger call at 2. I don't need this office." But the nightmare was only beginning. By the time Marcus and Vivian returned to mansion via a second taxi, that Marcus had to pay for with the crumpled cash he found in his pocket because his corporate Amex had been declined, the reality of the freeze was setting in. The mansion was eerily quiet. Usually at this hour, the housekeeper, Maria, would be vacuuming, or the cook would be prepping lunch. "Maria," Vivian called out, dropping her furs on the entry bench. "We need tea and something strong for Marcus." Silence. They walked into the kitchen. It was empty. On the marble island sat a neat pile of keys and a note. Vivian snatched it up. "Mrs. Wellington, the agency called. They said the automatic payroll deposit for this month was reversed due to insufficient funds. We have been instructed to cease work immediately. We have taken the liberty of clearing out the perishables as payment for the last week." "Maria." Vivian stared at the empty refrigerator. "They took the truffles. They took the champagne. They took the staff." "Mother," Marcus said, sinking onto a bar stool. He put his head in his hands. "It's over. The merger. Sterling won't sign if the assets are frozen. The deal is dead." "Don't you dare say that," Vivian snapped, her survival instincts kicking in. "You are Wellington. We do not lose to trash like Catherine. She's bluffing. She wants you back. That's all. This is a tantrum, a very expensive tantrum. She's a Thornton, Mother. Do you know what that means?" Marcus looked up, his eyes wild. "It means she has more money in her checking account than my company has in total valuation. She doesn't want me back. She wants to crush me." His phone rang. It was the only thing still working, likely because the bill wasn't due until the next day. The caller ID showed Sterling Enterprises, CEO office. Marcus took a deep breath. He had to charm his way out of this. He had to be the salesman. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus answered, forcing a laugh. "I assume you've heard the rumors. Just a little legal hiccup. With the ex-wife. Standard divorce leverage. Nothing that affects the IP or the..." "Marcus." The voice on the other end was like liquid nitrogen. "I'm not calling about rumors. I'm calling because I just had lunch with Richard Thornton." Marcus's blood ran cold. "Richard is an old friend of my father," Sterling continued. "He showed me some interesting documents, specifically regarding the ownership of the code you're trying to sell me. It seems you didn't write the core algorithm, Marcus. Your wife did." "That's a lie," Marcus stammered. "She's an art school dropout. She has a degree in mathematics from MIT under her maiden name, Marcus. She dropped out of art school to hide from the press. She wrote the code. The timestamps on the original repository match her personal laptop, which her lawyers have just submitted into evidence." There was a long pause. "You tried to sell me stolen goods," Sterling said quietly. "My lawyers are drafting a suit for bad faith negotiation. Expect to be served by morning. Do not contact me again." The line went dead. Marcus dropped the phone. It clattered onto the expensive Italian tile. "What did he say?" Vivian asked, her voice trembling. "Kath wrote the code," Marcus whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He thought back to those late nights in the apartment, him complaining about the bugs and the software, her looking over his shoulder, pointing at the screen, saying, "Maybe if you move that bracket there, or change the variable loop." He had thought she was just guessing. He had thought she was just lucky. She had been fixing his incompetence for 10 years. "She played us," Vivian hissed. "The little witch played the long game. We have to fix this." Marcus stood up, pacing the kitchen. "We need money. Cash. We need to hire a new lawyer, someone who isn't afraid of the Thorntons. We need to fight the freeze." "I have my jewelry," Vivian said, clutching her pearls. "And the artwork." "The artwork is insured under the company policy," Marcus said. "We can't sell it. But the jewelry, yes. Gather it up. We'll go to the broker on Jewelers Row." It was a desperate, humiliating plan, but it was all they had. An hour later, Vivian Wellington, the queen of high society, walked into a pawn shop. She called a secondary market broker with a velvet bag full of diamonds. The broker, a man with a loop stuck permanently to his eye, dumped the contents onto the felt tray. He picked up the heavy diamond necklace Marcus had given Vivian for her 60th birthday. He examined it. Then he picked up the sapphire ring, then the emerald brooch. He put the loop down and looked at Vivian with a bored expression. "I can give you $400 of gold weight. he said. Vivian gasped. $400? These are worth $50,000. That necklace is a Van Cleef. It's a replica, the broker said flatly. High-quality cubic zirconia set in 14-karat gold plating. All of it paste. Vivian turned slowly to Marcus. Marcus, you bought these. You told me they were investment pieces. Marcus's face was the color of ash. He remembered the years of tight budgets, the years he needed to look rich while actually drowning in debt. He had bought the fakes to keep his mother happy, to keep up appearances, telling himself he would replace them with real ones once the company took off. He had never gotten around to it. I had cash flow issues, Marcus mumbled. Vivian didn't scream. She didn't yell. She simply walked over to her son and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed in the small, dusty shop. You are a failure, she whispered, and you have dragged me into the gutter with you. They walked out of the shop with nothing. The snow had started to fall again, covering the city in white. But this time, they weren't the ones inside the warm mansion looking out. They were on the street, and the cold was biting deep. The counterattack. Desperation makes people do dangerous things. For Marcus Wellington, stripped of his fortune, his car, and his dignity, the only currency he had left was his voice. If he couldn't beat Catherine in the courtroom, he would destroy her in the living rooms of America. It was Jasmine who gave him the idea, ironically, just before she dumped him. She had met him at a coffee shop. He couldn't afford dinner. To return his spare apartment key. You're trending, Mark, she said, looking at her phone, but not in a good way. Everyone is calling you the Ice King because of the blizzard thing, but people love a redemption arc. Or a victim. I am the victim, Marcus insisted, grabbing her hand. She pulled it away. She lied to me for 10 years. She pretended to be poor. That's fraud. So say that, Jasmine said, standing up. Go on TV. Cry. Say she manipulated you. Say she was a spy for her father the whole time, trying to steal your ideas. People hate billionaires, Mark. Play the underdog. She left him with the bill for 2 lattes, which he paid with the last of the cash from his pocket. But the seed was planted. 2 days later, Marcus sat in the studio of The Morning Truth, a tabloid talk show known for its sensationalism. The host, a man named Chip Darrow, leaned in with faux sympathy. So, let me get this straight, Marcus, Chip said to the camera. You marry a woman you think is a struggling waitress. You support her. You build a life. And the whole time, she is secretly the heiress to the Thornton empire, spying on your tech company. It broke my heart, Chip, Marcus said, looking into the camera with practiced sadness. I loved Catherine. I didn't care about money, but she was taking notes. She was feeding my proprietary data to her father's conglomerates. And when I confronted her, when I asked for a divorce because I couldn't handle the betrayal, she used her father's lawyers to freeze me out. She threw me out. And the story about her being kicked out in a blizzard? Fabricated. Marcus lied smoothly. She took a private car. She staged that photo of her walking in the snow. It's all a PR stunt to ruin a self-made man. The interview aired live. In the brownstone in Lincoln Park, Catherine watched the screen, her face impassive. Thomas Reed sat beside her, jotting notes. He's good, Thomas admitted, lying through his teeth, but he's selling it. The social media sentiment is shifting. People are calling you a corporate spy. Catherine took a sip of tea. He forgot about the security system. The one at the mansion? Marcus was always so proud of his smart home, Catherine said, a cold smile touching her lips. He installed cameras everywhere, the driveway, the library, the porch. He wanted to monitor the staff. But he forgot that I was the admin for the cloud account. You have the footage? Thomas asked. I have everything. Him laughing. Vivian checking her watch. Me begging. The gates locking behind me. Catherine set her cup down. And I have something else. Audio from the library. Release it, Thomas said. Not to the court, to the internet. Within an hour, the narrative didn't just shift. It capsized. Catherine didn't go on a talk show. She simply posted a single video file to a new Twitter account with a handle @TheRealCatherine. The caption was 3 words. The truth about Winter. The video opened with the timestamp security footage. The resolution was 4K. It showed Catherine, tear-streaked and shivering, standing before Marcus and Vivian. The audio was crystal clear. Vivian, you were a placeholder, a sturdy, reliable placeholder. Marcus, consider it severance pay. You're still just a waitress I met at the diner. Vivian, throw her out. And for heaven's sake, don't take the silverware. Then the cut to the exterior camera. The heavy gates closing. Catherine walking alone into the blinding white snow. Marcus visible in the window, holding a drink, watching her go. The internet exploded. The hashtags changed instantly. Hashtag Justice for Catherine trended #1 globally within 20 minutes. Hashtag Boycott Wellington Tech followed. But the most damaging one was hashtag Placeholder. Women all over the world began sharing their stories of being used and discarded, rallying behind Catherine. Marcus was in the green room of the TV studio, waiting to be congratulated, when his phone started buzzing uncontrollably. Not calls, notifications. Thousands of them. He opened Twitter. He saw the video. He saw the comments. He left her to die in the cold. Vivian Wellington is a monster. I hope she takes every penny. The door to the green room opened. Chip Darrow walked in, but the sympathy was gone. You need to leave, Chip said coldly. Now, before the protesters blocked the exit. But the segment, we're retracting it. We can't be seen supporting a monster. Marcus, you lied to us. Get out. Marcus ran out the back door, pulling his jacket over his head. But the real blow came when he got back to the temporary apartment he was renting on a weekly rate. Jasmine was there, packing her bags. I saw the video, she said, not looking at him. It was edited, Marcus cried. It's out of context. She was crying, Mark. You laughed at her. You and your mother were drinking tea while she walked into a blizzard. Jasmine zipped up her suitcase. I can handle a jerk. I can't handle a sociopath. And honestly, I don't want to be the next placeholder. Jasmine, wait. I have nothing else. You have your mother, Jasmine said, opening the door. You two deserve each other. She slammed the door. Marcus stood in the silence of the cheap apartment. The walls were thin. He could hear the neighbors arguing. He looked at his reflection in the hallway mirror. He looked older, smaller. The phone rang again. It was Vivian. Marcus. She sounded small, terrified. The police are here. Police? Why? They have a warrant, Marcus. For the house. For the computers. Vivian began to sob. They're talking about embezzlement. They're saying I spent company money on personal accounts. They're saying you authorized it. Marcus dropped the phone. The freeze was no longer just about money. It was about freedom. Catherine wasn't just taking the company. She was coming for their lives. The final hearing. The courtroom for the final hearing was different this time. It wasn't a sterile family court. It was a superior court dealing with complex fraud and corporate malfeasance. And it was packed. Catherine sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Thomas Reed and a team of 3 other lawyers from Thornton and Associates. She wore navy blue this time, the color of authority. She looked untouchable. Marcus and Vivian sat on the defense side. They looked haggard. They had been forced to use a public defender, a young, overworked man named Mr. Davis, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Crawford had sued Marcus for unpaid legal fees and leaked damaging privileged information in the process to save his own skin. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Morrison was back, but this time he was accompanied by a forensic auditor who sat near the witness stand with a stack of binders 2 feet high. We are here to finalize the division of assets and address the counterclaims of fraud, Judge Morrison said. Mr. Reed, you may proceed. Thomas Reed stood up. He didn't need theatrics anymore. He had the math. Your Honor, Thomas began, the forensic audit of Wellington Technologies has revealed a systematic looting of company assets. Over the last 7 years, $3 million was diverted to show companies registered to Vivian Wellington. The gallery gasped. Vivian shrank into her coat. These funds, Thomas continued, were used to purchase jewelry, finance vacations, and cover gambling debts in Atlantic City, all labeled in the company ledger as R&D consultation fees. I didn't know. Marcus stood up, his voice cracking. She told me she had family money. You signed the checks, Mr. Wellington, Thomas said, holding up a blown-up image of a check. This is your signature. You authorized every penny. I just signed what you put in front of me, Marcus stammered. It was the ultimate admission of incompetence. The tech genius was nothing more than a puppet. Furthermore, Thomas said, turning to the judge, we have established that the core intellectual property of Wellington Technologies, the algorithm for predictive software, was authored entirely by Catherine Thornton Wellington. The patent application filed by Marcus Wellington bears a fraudulent declaration of inventorship. Mr. Davis, the judge looked at the public defender. Do you have a defense? Mr. Davis stood up, adjusted his glasses, and sighed. Your Honor, my clients plead incompetence. They argue that they did not understand the complex financial structures. Incompetence is not a defense of fraud. The judge snapped, especially not when you're the CEO of a publicly traded entity. The judge turned to Catherine. Mrs. Wellington, or should I say, Ms. Thornton, you have the leverage here. You hold the debt note. You own the IP. What is your request? The room went silent. This was the moment. Catherine stood up. She walked to the center of the room. She looked at Marcus, who was sweating through his cheap suit. She looked at Vivian, who was weeping silently into a tissue. I don't want them to go to jail, Catherine said softly. Marcus looked up, hope sparking in his eyes. Jail is too easy, Catherine continued, and it costs the taxpayers money. I want them to understand what it means to start over. Truly start over. She turned to the judge. I am calling in the loan from the Phoenix Group. Immediate repayment. Since they cannot pay, I am exercising the foreclosure clause. I am taking the company. I am taking the mansion. I am taking the contents of the accounts to satisfy the debt. Granted, the judge said firmly. However, Catherine added, I am not a monster. I will not throw them out in the snow with nothing. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single envelope. She walked over to the defense table and placed it in front of Marcus. What is this? Marcus whispered. It's a deed, Catherine said, to the cabin in upstate Wisconsin. The one your father left you before he died. The one you tried to sell last year, but couldn't because it was too run down. It was a shack, a rotting hunting cabin with no electricity, and a wood stove. It's in your name, Marcus. It's the only thing I didn't touch. It's paid off. It's a roof over your head. You expect us to live in a shack? Vivian shrieked. I am a Wellington. No, Catherine said, cold as ice. You are a debtor. And as of today, you are homeless. You have the cabin, and you have the clothes on your back. And Marcus, he looked at her, tears streaming down his face. Yes, Kath, I'm keeping the dog, she said. A ripple of laughter went through the courtroom. It wasn't a joke. It was a final severing of ties. The golden retriever, Barnaby, whom Marcus had ignored for years, was the only living thing in that house worth saving. Order, the judge called, hiding a smile. Judgment is entered in favor of the defendant. Wellington Technologies is hereby transferred to the control of Catherine Thornton. The remaining assets are seized. Case closed. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Security guards moved forward, not to escort Catherine out, but to escort Marcus and Vivian. They had a hand over their watches, their phones, which were company property, and the keys to the mansion right there in the courtroom. Catherine didn't watch them leave. She turned to Thomas Reed. It's done, she said. Not quite, Thomas smiled. Mr. Sterling is on line 1. He wants to know if the new owner of Wellington Technologies is willing to restart merger negotiations. He's offering 20% more than he offered Marcus. Catherine smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached her eyes. Tell him I'll meet him, but not at the office. Where then? Tell him to meet me at the Bluebird Diner. The diner where you used to work? Thomas raised an eyebrow. Yes, Catherine said, picking up her bag. I want to remind myself where I came from. And I want to make sure I never forget that the person serving the coffee might just own the place one day. She walked out of the courtroom, the heavy doors swinging open for her. Outside, the sun was shining. The snow was melting. The winter was over. 5 years later. The cabin was exactly as Catherine had described it, a rotting tooth in the jaw of the North Woods. For Marcus Wellington, the tech genius who once complained about the thread count of his sheets, reality was now a nightmare of blister hands and freezing drafts. He spent his days chopping wetwood just to keep the cast iron stove from dying, while Vivian sat in a moth-eaten armchair, wrapped in blankets, staring at the peeling wallpaper in bitter silence. The sharpest blow came 3 months later in the local general store. Marcus, wearing dirty boots and counting crumpled bills for a loaf of discounted bread, glanced up at the small television in the corner. CNBC flashed a headline in gold. Phoenix Rising. Catherine Thornton on the future of tech. There she was. Catherine looked radiant, sitting in a sleek studio, wearing a blazer that cost more than Marcus's truck. She explained how she had tripled Wellington Technologies' valuation in under a year. The code was always good, she told the interviewer with a cryptic smile. The company was just suffocated by ego. We stripped that away. Marcus stood frozen in the aisle. He watched as the interviewer congratulated her on her engagement to Michael Sterling. He realized then, standing in the dust of a hardware store, that he had never been a success story. He had been a parasite, and the host had finally cut him loose. Time moved relentlessly. Vivian passed away during the third winter, her heart simply giving out from the weight of her own resentment. Marcus buried her in the cheapest plot available. There were no mourners, no flowers from the society crowd. Alone and unable to bear the ghost in the cabin, Marcus sold it and returned to the city. But the name Wellington was toxic. No firm would touch him. Desperation forced him into a uniform. He became a banquet server for a high-end catering company, learning to become invisible to the wealthy people he used to call peers. The final encounter. 5 years after the divorce. Fate arranged one final meeting. It was the innovators of the Decade Gala at the Art Institute of Chicago. Marcus was assigned to Table 1, the VIP section. He kept his head down, focused on the white tablecloths and crystal glasses, terrified of being recognized. He approached the main guest with a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir. "More wine, madam?" he asked, his voice rough from years of silence. "Yes, please." The voice stopped his heart. Marcus's hand trembled, and a single drop of red wine splashed onto the pristine cloth. Panic seized him. He grabbed a napkin, stammering an apology, and looked up. Catherine sat there. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet, diamonds glittering at her throat. Beside her sat Michael Sterling, looking at her with adoration. Catherine looked at the waiter. She saw the gray hair, the stooped shoulders, the fraying cuffs of his uniform. "Marcus," she whispered. It wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. Michael stiffened. "You know this man, darling?" Marcus wanted the floor to swallow him. He braced himself for her revenge. She could have him fired on the spot. She could mock him to the entire table. He closed his eyes, waiting for the blow. "I used to know him," Catherine said calmly, her voice devoid of malice. "A long time ago." She didn't expose him. She didn't destroy him. She simply looked at him with a pity that hurt worse than hatred. Hate implies you still care. Pity implies you are nothing. "I think we're fine for wine, Marcus." "Thank you." He nodded, his face burning, and turned to leave. "Wait," Catherine said. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a bill. She folded it and placed it on his tray. "For the service," she said softly. "It's a tough job. I know. I used to do it." It was $100. Marcus walked away, navigating through the sea of laughing billionaires, and pushed through the kitchen doors. He went out into the alley and sat on a milk crate. It started to snow. Big wet flakes, just like that day at the mansion. But this time, he was the one in the cold. He looked at the money. He wanted to rip it up, to save his pride. But he couldn't. He needed it for rent. Inside the warmth of the gala, Michael took Catherine's hand. "Are you okay?" Catherine looked at the kitchen doors one last time, closing the chapter on the man who had thrown her away. I'm better than okay, she smiled, stepping onto the dance floor. I'm free. Epilogue. Catherine's story isn't just about revenge. It's about realization. Marcus Wellington thought power came from a bank account, a mansion, and a title. He thought he could discard a human being like a broken toy because he assumed she had no value. But he made the classic mistake of the arrogant. He confused kindness with weakness. Catherine proved that true power isn't about what you have. It's about who you are. When they stripped her of everything, they revealed her steel. When they threw her into the cold, they didn't freeze her heart. They ignited her destiny. In the end, Marcus was left with exactly what he gave. Nothing. And Catherine? She reclaimed the one thing he could never buy. Herself. We all have a Marcus in our lives. Someone who doubts us, uses us, or thinks we are just placeholders. Let this story be your reminder. Your value is not determined by how someone treats you. It is determined by what you do when the gates lock behind you. Don't just walk away. Rise. The end.